Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would review this little fight, at least overall, give my little analysis on the Andrew Ruiz versus Chris Arreola fight that happened yesterday on Saturday. And then I'm probably, I may not do a video until the Canelo Alvarez Billy Joe Saunders fight because I've just been so busy. But we'll see overall what happens. Anyways, when it comes down to it, Andrew Ruiz, for those of you that didn't hear, Andrew Ruiz Jr. ended up getting a unanimous decision over Chris Arreola yesterday in their matchup on pay-per-view. I ended up watching it, thought it was actually a very decently competitive fight, which is something that I was not expecting. I thought Andrew Ruiz was going to go in there, and I thought that he was going to clearly take out Chris Arreola, but obviously I was very wrong on that. When it came down to it, this was a very competitive fight pretty much throughout the whole entire thing. I believe Andrew Ruiz still dominated the fight when you talk about the sense of him clearly winning rounds. Some people may think that the scorecards were a bit far apart. I personally didn't. I think that this was about a 10 rounds to 2, 11 rounds to 1 fight. I think I personally scored it about 11 rounds to 1 for Andrew Ruiz. So those scorecards I didn't necessarily have a problem with. But Chris Arreola was making this fight competitive throughout the whole entire thing. He even was able to hurt Andrew Ruiz and able to knock him down a little bit early on. He was able to knock him down, I believe, in the second round. And he was able to hurt him a multitude of times in this fight because Andrew Ruiz was not always defensively responsible enough in this fight. And Chris Arreola, let me give him credit. And let me also give his trainer Joe Goosen credit because when it comes down to it, he made Chris Arreola a certain amount more competitive than I thought he could be in this fight. I thought that Chris Arreola was going to go into this fight and get stopped within the first 6 rounds. That's not what happened at all. I have to give him and his trainer a lot of credit. It seems like Joe Goosen was able to somewhat revive Chris Arreola's career, and it made him look pretty decent because there's been a couple of fights, within the past few years that I've seen Chris Arreola in where I don't think that he looked overtly competitive. So we'll see what happens. So good on him for at least giving it a very tough fight. He certainly did not come into this fight to lay down. He never does, but sometimes Chris Arreola just does not always compete at the highest level very well, especially within most recent years. But he did decent here, or at least the best that he could. Well, personally, was I overtly impressed with Andy Ruiz? Not really in this fight, but I think that he was impressive enough for me to say that he would be decently competitive with a lot of the other top contenders. Now, will an Andrew Ruiz like this, will he beat an Anthony Joshua in a trilogy? Will he beat a Tyson Fury? Will he beat a Deontay Wilder? No, probably not. He's really going to have to tighten up his defense. He's really going to have to tighten up his ability to block certain punches and overall his ability to get careless at times. Because Andrew Ruiz, when it comes down to it, I've seen a multitude of times in this fight where he would get punched by Chris Arreola and he would keep swinging at Chris Arreola overall a little bit too recklessly and at times get hurt. So I think he needs to be careful with that. I think that he needs to tighten up his defense, and I think overall, if he does that, he should be in pretty decent shape. But will this Andrew Ruiz, in my opinion, beat one of the top 3 heavyweights in the world, meaning once again Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder? I don't think so. But I would love to see Andrew Ruiz in a fight next where maybe it would be a rematch against Joseph Parker. I would maybe like to see him against a Derek Chisora. That would not even be a bad fight. I wouldn't mind seeing him against a Luis Ortiz and Alexander Povetkin, a Dillian White. One of those fights I think would be a very interesting fight. And we're going to see how well Andrew Ruiz really has improved under Eddie Reynoso when he takes some of those fights. I think the biggest problem that I've seen with Andrew Ruiz before this fight had happened was his lack of mobility, his lack of foot speed. And I think Eddie Reynoso has really tried to work on him with that. It looked a little bit better in this fight. His mobility and his ability to cut off the ring looked a decent amount better in this fight, I thought. But we're going to see how he truly looks against some of these other top contenders. So I hope that he gets a very big fight next because that will really determine to me how great he's going to look. I personally would love to see a Joseph Parker versus Andrew Ruiz Jr. rematch. That's personally what I would like to see. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what match he can get next. I personally don't know if he's going to get one of those big 3 heavyweights next, but we'll see overall what happens. Anyways, that's really about it for my little fight review. Good, at least, for the majority of the fight. Good performance by Andrew Ruiz, but not great. A certain a certain amount of competitiveness was in this fight. A certain amount more competitive than it probably should have been at Andrew Ruiz. been more defensively responsible. But it is what it is. I got to give Chris Arreola and Joe Goossen a lot of credit. Joe Goossen made Chris Arreola very much competitive in this fight, and when it came down to it, it seemed like he made him more sharper for this fight than he has been in his last few fights. So I give him a hell of a lot of credit. So a lot of credit to Chris Arreola for making this a tough fight pretty much throughout the whole entire thing. And credit to Andrew Ruiz for, at least in some sense, dominating the fight because he was able to tally up most of the rounds. So we'll see what happens with Mr. Andrew Ruiz and also with Chris Arreola. Personally, I think Chris Arreola probably should retire at this point in time in his career, as he is 40 years old and taking a hell of a lot of damage. And Mr. Andrew Ruiz, we'll see overall what happens with him. I'm going to be very excited to see what he does in his next fight, especially if it's against one of these big challengers. But we'll see what happens. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Talk to you all later.